For Starmer and this Labour government, everything is falling into place. After all, leopards don't change their spots. Labour has also demonstrated this in the past. Following the government's most recent bid, Labour has been denounced as corrupt. Naturally, we will go over the specifics of this in today's video, along with some of the most recent national news, but first, hit the like and subscribe button for more. The government has announced plans to remove the last of the hereditary peers from the House of Lords, which would be the largest change to Parliament in 25 years. One of Labour's promises in the general election was to remove the 92 seats set aside for hereditary peers who get their titles through their families. The goal is to complete the reforms put in place by the previous Labour government, which eliminated all 700-year-old hereditary peers' ability to serve in the Lords in 1999, leaving only 92 as a concession to the Conservatives. After that, Farage publicly criticised the decision, calling it corrupt and a means of packing the legislature with supporters and party funders. "I don't think the public in Britain has ever had a worse opinion of the House of Lords than it does now," he said. "Sadly, people are able to recognise it for what it is. It's being used purely for favouritism. In my instance, it was an utterly dishonest attempt to try and manipulate us prior to the 2019 general election. This is disgusting, which is why I naturally declined." Clyde Lord Strath then declared that the purpose of this is to have more representation from their own people in Parliament. He declared the heredities were the last to go at the end of the last century, leaving only 92 behind. The Blairites did nothing but clog the House with their own cronies and placement, and they will do it once more. He went on, they will replace them with their own people after getting rid of about 40 Conservatives and 30 or so crossbenchers, which is the opposition. We will never get the necessary reform for this country because Starmer and his cronies will, in my opinion, create 50 new peers over the course of the next few months. This is a scandal. Nevertheless, I'm happy that Farage and others are pointing it out for what it is, corruption. What do you think about this move? Growing discontent with Keir Starmer's leadership is making it evident that Labour is more interested in promoting its platform than in finding solutions to the actual issues facing the country. Here's a summary of how Labour's policies are hurting the UK and not delivering the much-needed solutions.
We have Keir Starmer, who is, as you say, completely joyless. He completely kind of gives you the impression that he doesn't even know why he's the Prime Minister. I mean, he obviously has forgotten that Rishi Sunak is no longer the Prime Minister. He called him Prime Minister 5 times on Wednesday, which at least gave us all a bit of a laugh. But he is relentlessly kind of miserable, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think that's not going to last. And also, I think the criticism I hear from across the House is actually, look, like Labour is still in campaign mode. They still think they're campaigning. They have this instinct to kind of talk down the economy. And yet, if you look at things like the Institute of Director Business Confidence Survey, they're now traducing and trashing the UK's confidence in standing in the markets. And of course, that's dangerous because if you want to get the people to come and invest in this country, you need to sell it. And so Labour needs to get out of campaigning mode, stop talking the country down, and actually get flipped back into governing mode if they want to be serious in trying to fix some of these countries' problems.
Yeah, exactly right. And, he's surrounded by people who don't appear to be capable of doing their jobs. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, fresh from her, rave in Ibiza, comes back and decides she's going to pull up the ladder for everybody who wants to buy their own council home, even though it was okay for her to do it to make 48,000 quid. She really, really, really wants people to work a 4-day week. She keeps talking about, I'm working class, I like dancing. Well, great, that's fine. But what is she actually doing for a job, and how are they improving Britain? They're just not. Ed Miliband, who we're going to hear from in a minute, is setting up the Great British Energy Corporation, which doesn't produce any energy. Let's have a look.
Great British Energy will deliver our local power plan, working with local authorities, combined authorities and communities to deliver the biggest expansion of support for community-owned energy in history.
The Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Secretary of State and at least 50 Labour MPs promised their constituents in the July election that GB Energy would save them £300 a year of their energy bills. They said it on their election literature, on social media and in hustings. They said it because they were told to by the Secretary of State. But I listened very closely to his speech today and I didn't hear him make a promise that GB Energy will save them £300 on their energy bills.
Yeah, the £300 is a complete sort of shibboleth, isn't it? It doesn't exist, never did exist. They made it up. They more or less cancelled it before the election actually took place because they got found out. And instead of which, we now get this ludicrous Ed Miliband's plan to kind of launch a load of wind farms in the North Sea, which are ending up going to cost us about, 150 quid per household in the country.
The leadership of Keir Starmer is proving to be disastrous for the United Kingdom since his frequent blunders and joyless attitude point to a leader who seems totally detached from the Prime Minister role. Starmer's several blunders, including several times referring to Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister by error, expose his lack of concentration and clear direction. Not only is his ongoing approach of downing the economy unappealing, but it also damages confidence rather than inspiring. Labour is still in campaign mode, relentlessly criticising the state of the nation without providing any workable answers instead of entering governing mode. This mindset damages the UK's global market position since it discourages investment at a period when Britain most needs it. Starmer also surrounds him with a staff that seems equally unfit for running the nation. The contradictions in Angela Rayner's advocacy of policies she herself avoided in order to become wealthy simply highlight the hypocrisy in Labour's leadership. Ed Miliband's Great British Energy Scheme, which promises large but delivers nothing, further compromises any credibility Labour has left. Already a complete fabrication, the promise to save consumers $300 a year on their energy bills has left British households to pay for ineffective and expensive energy solutions such as North Sea wind farms. Under Starmer's direction, the Labour Party is essentially providing hollow promises, inadequate leadership, and ongoing national confidence decline rather than real progress for the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, a really damning indictment of Labour, which is that they were so stupid as to go into this election suggesting bills will come down, knowing, of course, that energy bills are largely dependent on prices in the international energy market, and actually making a hostage to the fortunes of what goes on overseas and elsewhere. So I think Claire Coutinho gave a very strong performance in the House of Commons yesterday. I think that she's certainly one to watch and kind of keeping Ed Miliband's feet to the fire on this one. I suspect, I'm very much reminded of what the one Labour MP said before the election to me, which is that this man ended up costing us 3 elections: 2015 when he led the party to disaster, 2017 and 2019, of course, when he introduced that system that got Mr Corbyn elected, and they said before the election he might cost us a 4th. But that could come in 2029, of course, if energy bills keep going up and they keep making decisions which seem to have no kind of implication and wariness about what's going on in the country right now.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, let's talk about the migrant problem, which obviously, you know, Labour said they would solve. They said they had a plan. They said that they were going to smash the gangs. What we saw this week was 12 people perishing in the Channel because they couldn't make it across in a dinghy. And what we've also seen is Germany today saying they'd actually quite like to hitch up to the Rwanda plan and send some migrants from Germany to Rwanda. We spent 290 million quid and got nowhere.
And the Germans are going to be the ones that potentially benefit from this.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this is a really interesting story, I think. This is Germany's Migration Commissioner, Joachim Stamm, saying to a podcast this week that they're very much looking at this. And I think this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One of which, of course, is that it puts Keir Starmer in a very difficult bind because he's been saying no sensible government would ever do a scheme like Rwanda. It was a gimmick. And yet, of course, just last week, he was proposing a deal with the Germans, the biggest single treaty with the Germans. And so what's he going to do? Is he going to come out now and criticise the German government and say we know better? Is he going to his new continental partner just at the same time as he wants to build up Remainer ties? I'm very interested to see how the government responds to that.
Yeah.
The thing to note is also that, the fact is that Germany is considering Rwanda, and they said it was the only country that they're considering doing this deal with. I remember for years you've had Labour MPs saying we could get deals with all sorts of countries. The fact is Rwanda is the only game in town right now, and I think if the government wants to have some kind of deal like Rwanda but in a different country, they're going to really struggle, as Germany has found.
Yeah, well, you know what's happened? He's like the sort of kiss of death, Keir Starmer. You know, I used to have an editor that I worked for, and whenever he went to visit anybody in hospital, it was always like, for God's sake, don't go, because
the way Keir Starmer handles important concerns including the migrant crisis and energy policy simply highlights Labour's ineptitude. Knowing that international market dynamics control prices, his team entered the election promising things they couldn't keep, that energy bills would drop. Labour is left vulnerable by this narrow-minded approach since their energy policies lack substance and foresight. Claire Coutinho's performance in Parliament indicates that Labour's shortcomings on these areas won't go unchecked either, since she keeps Ed Miliband responsible for their careless policy-making. Starmer's approach is even more catastrophic on the migrant crisis. Labour's grand assertions of destroying people-smuggling gangs are debunked by sad events like the Channel deaths recently, which show they have no plausible answer. For Starmer, however, the true humiliation comes from Germany contemplating implementing the very Rwanda plan Labour has paraded as a gimmick. Starmer now finds himself in a conundrum. Should he stick to denouncing a strategy even Germany is considering, or should he change and run the danger of appearing hypocritical? His inability to lead boldly on these important problems simply emphasizes his lack of vision and capacity to manage the difficult problems confronting the United Kingdom now. While other countries and governments work toward real answers, Labour's hollow rhetoric is becoming more and more detrimental. Starmer is turning into the political kiss of death, dragging Labour and its pledges farther into irrelevancy. What are your thoughts on Keir Starmer? Let me know your thoughts down below. That's it for today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.